Welcome everyone to the LEC Lounge. My name is Sjokz, and in this new format, we will be talking one-on-one with a special guest every episode about league, life, and everything in between. And for this one, I'm very happy to be joined by Jacob Mebdi, aka YamatoCannon, coach for Vitality. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, Yamato, it's very nice to have you here. Obviously, things are going quite well with Vitality. It's now your third year with the organization, and last year was, of course, incredibly successful. How are things going now?
I think our start has been amazing. 5-1. I think in the beginning, and especially with the new format, points matter so much. It's crazy to look back because some of those games, you can say it could have gone either way. There was the backdoor against Rogue, and there were other crazy games, and this is what comes with the delicacy of best of one, right? But all in all, I'm very happy with our progress as a team. If you look beyond the points, and we're heading in the right direction.
Well, I would say so, definitely. If you look at maybe the 2 years that you've worked with this group, you know, plus or minus, when you started off with the 3 rookies at the beginning of last year, I think you can look back on the development quite happily, even though I know it isn't finished yet.
I think it's, it's always fun because in the beginning, even the owners of Vitality were like, okay, we have no idea what you're doing. We have no idea who these players are. We have no idea who Jizuke is. We have no idea who Attila is. Jack Troll. Gilius we've heard of. He's a bit cocky on Twitter, and Kabashad we like. So it was, everyone was skeptical. Mm-hmm. The prediction was very crazy, but I was very confident in a strong start because these guys barely took a break. They came in, they played their last tournament 14th December. So they came in fresh. They knew where they had to be mindset-wise. And we had kind of a fire start.
Yeah.
And when I heard about the stories of how they got to the point where they are, I was so amazed and intrigued by it. And I knew these type of personalities would go very far. Mm-hmm. And I chose to continue with them into this year because I know their peak has been far from reached.
Yeah, it seems like this is a perfect fit, Yamato and Vitality and those guys. But I do also want to dive a bit deeper into you as a person. You're only 23 now, but you've been in the league scene for an incredibly long time, 7-8 years, back when you were the captain of Team Solo Mebdi, I should say. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, Team Solo Mebdi. Where do I start? That was... It was a bunch of rejects coming together. It was crazy because it started with me and Nuktak. We wanted to make a team pretty much. And we were playing with Wheel Failure and Puju. And they wanted to go off in a different team. And it just came off as a very strange kind of reaction because one day we wanted to make something together and one day they disappeared and left us. Yeah. So me and Nuktak were like, okay, we're going to play bot lane.
Yeah.
We're going to play bot lane and we're going to pretty much stomp them. We're going to chase them in the tournaments. So that's how it started. And Nuktak was pretty much too young to play the LCS qualifier and we had to fill in some other people. And it started off with Darkwing Jax. Darkwing Jax is a mystery of a man, considered the most toxic person to ever play League of Legends ever, yes.
You also had Jensen, who also wasn't an angel back then.
Yes, Jensen.
Incarnation.
Yeah. The story of how we got together with Jensen specifically was super funny because Nuktak was vouching for him, but Jensen had me on his troll list. Every time I was in game with Jensen, he was pretty much picking Heimerdinger, which at the time was a troll pick. Yeah. Right now it's fantastic. I get it.
Times have changed.
And I just decided to put that aside, the kind of beef that we had, and we decided to make a team together. And all this craziness came together into what was, at the time, a fantastic team.
Yeah, a sick team. From very early on, the team was even named after you. I believe you cast it also. Why was it that, from a background of someone who you also played StarCraft 2, you liked Warcraft, all of that. Why is it League, the thing that got you, that you wanted to work for, that you wanted to play for?
It's crazy because I remember when I tried playing League for the first time, I was like, what is this? It was one of those things when you have a group of friends, they play a game, you play a game.
Yeah.
And I tried playing League and I just saw the growth. I played it, my friends played for like 1 year, 2 years, And I remember watching the first World Championship at home. I saw the Arrow in the finals. I saw Fnatic playing the Gragas and the Alistar picking up and top lane with Brand. And I saw the growth coming into the IEMs, and I just thought to myself, I had this vision, this dream that I wanted to be a part of the inception of this kind of great scene. I had this very wild imagination of what it could be, and it's crazy to think about today that all my dreams and my imaginations kind of come true.
Yeah.
And it was just a very vague dream. I remember back in season 2, people were like, oh, LCS is coming. This league system is coming. Everyone's going to get paid money. Everyone's going to have a salary. I'm like, wow.
Wow, I want to be in it.
I want to be in it pretty much.
I remember it very vividly also that time. It was all around, you know. Everyone was streaming League of Legends. There were tournaments every weekend. On Twitch, there were IEMs. And you looked at these players. I definitely did those teams. And I was like, wow, they're rock stars, you know, CLG, EU. They're flying from here to there. They were kind of rock stars. And it was it was all exploding. More and more people were playing. More and more tournaments happened. LCS was coming. I still remember that pull of like, I want to be part of this.
Yes.
But there's a big step between wanting and actually doing, right? It must have not been so easy even for you to just be like, all right, now I'm playing every day and I'll be a pro.
It's crazy because it just turned into an obsession. It wasn't ever like, okay, I need to play these games. I need to wake up and stay up late and have to play these games. It was never, ever like that. And I think that is what makes the difference. Because I was very happy with skipping school. I was very happy with staying up very late to play the games. I remember there was this inception of my career where I played like 16 hours a day, which is not sustainable, but it was something that I really wanted to do. My parents were against it. Everything that was in my life was against it. But this was something, you know, I was 16, 17, and I just wanted to become good.
Yeah.
And it was just an obsession. And I think I didn't see anything beyond that, pretty much.
I mean, the parents thing, I definitely follow you. When I would be playing even other games, you know, I would go to school. I was actually a goody two-shoes. I would always have my homework done as the first person in the class. But in any case, I would still spend so much time gaming. And when I tried to make a career out of it, it was very much my mother being like, what are you even talking about? You know, this isn't a job. We paid for your education. You know, what are you doing? Of course, I'm a bit older than you. So when I started, I had a degree. I went to university, but it didn't change anything for my mom, you know, or for my family. They don't understand it. Now they do a lot more. So that's good. But yeah, it did work out. Do you feel like you made sacrifices? Because in a way you say, oh, you know, if you skipped school or you played 16 hours a day, you don't hang out with your friends and you don't do a lot of things that maybe other young kids do.
Yeah, sure. Like, I think, you know, there's this phase where everyone goes through during high school, everyone goes out to party, everyone has their first taste of alcohol and all that jazz, you know, all these crazy stories that, you know, my friends kept sharing with me, the guys that introduced me to League. I was very fortunate with my group of friends because no matter how much I wasn't around, our relationship always remained the same.
Yeah.
I could see them after 2 years of being gone in Germany and come back and everything was similar somehow. They always give me the true feeling of home because it's always the same jokes, the same bullshitting around, the same pranks that we pull at each other. You know, it was always the same. And I think that helped me keep my sanity because there's always this thing in the back of your mind, what am I missing? And there was a bunch of things at school. Everyone kind of looks at you and think, what the hell is this guy doing? He's not coming to school that much because I had to juggle between LCS and going to high school because I just traveled in between.
That's such a difficult choice because at least when you finish high school, right, and you go into university, you know, there can be a bit more leniency from parents that say, okay, you can take this year, and it's still very difficult, and it still almost never happens. But how did you even do that? But you can't just not go to school.
It was crazy. I was really, really lucky because like in high school, every class has like a main teacher, and the guy that was my main teacher, he was so supportive because in Sweden at the time, I don't know what the rules are now because I'm so disconnected from everything. It's just league for me. I don't know. It was pretty much if you are absent a set amount of hours, you just don't get a grade.
Yeah.
And I had pretty decent grades for the amount of time that I spent at school. And my main teacher, he pretty much hooked me up. He set up, talked with the principal. The principal was completely against it. He was like, what are you doing? Playing games? You don't get to do this. And I just, every time I called in sick, the main teacher guy, he's like, okay, he's playing tournaments. He's doing good things.
Gosh.
So he hooked me up, set everything up to make sure that I don't fail anything. And without him, I wouldn't have a high school degree or whatever you call it, diploma. But not that that's useful, but it's a nice thing.
So what you're saying is we need to thank Mr.
What is
Well,
his
maybe
name?
you don't want to say the guy that was making you play video games, but we need to thank that teacher for, vitality at World. Let's just put it that way. No,
Pretty
it's
much.
awesome.
Also my mother and my brother, because they also play games.
Mm-hmm.
My mother introduced me to Diablo 1 back when I was like 4.
Okay.
That helped me a lot, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that of course will help because I can imagine, of course, she won't tell you to skip school, but at least she understands what it's like to be, especially if she played Diablo, she knows what it is to grind.
Like when I said my parents earlier, it's mostly my father that was against it. He's very old-fashioned, and he's like, you have to grow up to become a doctor, sacrifice everything to come to this country, which is, my father taught me the idea of hard work. Yeah. And I think I applied all his lessons in gaming, which he still to this day doesn't understand, and which is fine, because I'm getting the support that I need from my family. Anyway.
Doesn't understand it, but does your father and by now the rest of your family they don't have to necessarily understand it, but they can accept it and see that you are happy and successful. Is that the case?
I get pretty sad because I don't write too much, which is my fault.
Yeah.
But they always brag to their friends. Oh, he's on TV. He's wearing suits. Look at him. Look how confident he is when he's talking in front of people. I wouldn't be able to do that. Things like this, the usual.
Yeah, for sure. And it's the same for me. It's like, we don't really understand. But especially when you're on actual TV, when there's a news thing or something, and then it's like, then everyone's like, that's my granddaughter. No, I understand it. But, well, I mean, we're all very happy that you made it to where you are. Everyone knows it, but I'm still going to say it again. You're only 23 now. That means from the minute we saw you coaching like 3-4 years ago, you were so young. You were a teenager when you got your first coaching gigs. I mean, have you ever stopped to think about that? How, other people would be doing completely different things, but this is what you chose.
It's weird because I feel older somehow.
Yeah.
Like I was forced to work almost my entire life, which is, at the time I hated it, but it gave me the respect for hard work that I have today. Mm-hmm. I had to work in like garages and a pizzeria that my father owned, whatever business he was doing at the time. And after school, I had to work and then find time to play games whenever. Mm-hmm. And I feel like with this experience, it kind of pushed me into the coaching position from a more understanding point of view.
Yeah.
And when I started coaching, my intention was not to continue coaching. I was like, I want to be in a gaming house, free from parents, just play the game whenever scrims are over, and that's it. And then it just became an even bigger passion than playing the game. I just loved the responsibility that comes with being a coach, because you have this opportunity to affect people's lives, no matter how silly or crazy they are, or how talented they are, whatever position they come from, or culture or background they come from, you have this unique position of responsibility, pretty much.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you say I've had to work my whole life, so that way I know I have that responsibility. It was similar for me. I worked at McDonald's everywhere. It's always, but I always keep that with me as something very, very good, because I often think about the guys you coach, for instance, and they went to high school and they kind of just were plopped into this pro player life. They go in a house, they earn a lot of money for people their age, but they also deal with a lot of pressure. It's incredibly difficult. How do you, as still a young person, because you are wise beyond your years, you say it, but you still have to deal with all of that,
I think the main thing that I try to remember is that I can make mistakes too. And I try to always improve on that too, because that's what I expect from my players. I try to view things from a point of view where what I expect from my players, I should expect from myself. And I've made mistakes and I've tried to learn from them. And when I did my first coaching job, what I tried to do was prepare myself as much as possible. I read about coaches in different sports. I'm a big fan of Carlo Ancelotti, Guardiola, Sir Alex Ferguson. The list is very, very long. And I just tried to read their biographies.
Do you feel like because you were so young, you had to read all that, you know? You had to find some way to base all of this on? Because you don't just wake up and you're a coach.
Pretty much. Like I came into the job with nothing at all except an open mind. And I was very lucky because I worked with Horo and he worked in SKT with Coma. So he was pretty much telling me, Coma does this, Coma does that. And I was like, if he does this, then,
Between Ancelotti, Guardiola, and Coma, you've got a good base there. Yeah, for sure.
For sure. It was very intriguing because I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue coaching because I wanted to play. But it was similar to the idea I had with League in general. It was the inception of League, and I wanted to follow the dream of being a part of the beginning, and the same thing with coaching. I just noticed how many other coaches, they just see it as a role where, okay, you tell the players how to play the game. If they are bad, then it's their fault. That was the idea of coaching at a specific time. And for me, I was always thinking the role is so much more than that. And the honor and the dignity that comes with the role, I wanted to set an example for it.
Yeah. Do you feel like in a way, revolutionize is a very, very big word, but that you for yourself set different goals and different practices than other coaches did at that time?
Cool. I took a lot of ideas from Coma, so it's hard to say. I think the basis of how practice, like the scrimming and the practice happened, is very similar. But I think I, in the beginning, took a very important look at how the culture of the team worked. I think this is something that was very much scraped under the rug for a lot of teams. It's very important that you have a team of people, a group of people that are happy because they have to spend so much time together, which is really unheard of. They are playing 12 hours a day together in the same room. And if they don't like each other, if there's any kind of grudges there or tension, as you said, then it's not going to be a good environment. Everyone needs to be happy, so the culture needs to be in a good place.
It's similar to, working in a company or whatever sort. If there's one thing that's off, the entire team balance and synergy is going to be off. But that responsibility then also lies with you. I mean, I definitely look at if I walk into a meeting and I'm in a piss poor mood, that's going to shine on the rest of the people that you're supposed to work with. So you always have to be the rock. That must be hard.
Yeah, for sure. I've been called emotionally unavailable by a lot of people.
Women? No, I'm just kidding.
By my girlfriend, yes. This is something that I'm working on, of course. But this is something that comes from my background. It was pretty much, as I said, my father is very old-fashioned, hard work, no complaining, no whining, no emotions. And this is kind of what I grew up with. I don't think I shed a single tear in my entire childhood because it was always like, need to be sharp and alert and always the man's man, so to speak. And I think this made it easier. I truly see coaching from the business perspective, and it comes down to the philosophy I have in anything. If I expect it from my players, I try to set an example for it. And emotions in business are very inconsistent. Yeah,
I mean, you will allow me to bring up sometimes when you break that barrier. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's a healthy thing to talk about because I agree with your philosophy, let me put it that way. But it is in this genre and this branch and this competition, it is sometimes difficult. I particularly remember in Copenhagen, after the third place match, you were very emotional. I saw you with your brother and your family. I saw you with the players who were very emotional. We know Worlds as well. So is it to you that you pick and choose those moments where you do let that happen and you do let your players see your vulnerability?
It's for sure. I think being completely unemotional is what you strive for, but it's also impossible. Because I think the bottom line is everyone's human and emotions are going to be a part of everything that we do. And something that I've tried to do more is to enjoy those moments more. This is something that I struggled with in the past. It was always, we won one game, what's the next step?
Yeah.
Now, at least in those moments, like the third place match, I've learned and tried harder to enjoy those moments and really, you try to kind of capture it. Because it kind of goes away so fast. I'm sure you've experienced the same.
Yeah.
Where time just kind of flies and then you're sitting there at the end of the day in your hotel room and everything just is over somehow.
Well, I had a long talk with Carlos, of course, about some of these matters. And he said that for him, it's, it's always about looking forward. You never take the time to stand still and look at it. But sometimes you need to force yourself to do it because otherwise you're going to go crazy.
Yeah, I saw this thing in How I Met Your Mother where they take like mental pictures.
Yes.
And this is kind of the principle that I try to apply. Yeah, you kind of try to just realize you're in the moment. And then, of course, it's always the same. It's like, third place match, Fnatic has to win for us to go to Worlds. And then we celebrated that too. And then now it's Worlds time. And now it's our group and things just fly. But I've realized when I take those moments and I actually like zone in, I try to do it, I try to put it in my pep talk as well before games. Like we huddle up and I try to make sure everyone appreciates these moments because time flies. It really does.
Yeah, it does. On the topic of coaching, which is a very layered topic, I think, but something that's always interested me is that, when you look to football, for instance, and people you look at for inspiration, nobody's going to be angry if Guardiola can't hit the free kick that he's telling his players to kick, right? But in League of Legends and in gaming in general, the guys that you're coaching, know so much more about the intricacies of the game. And sometimes I think, okay, will they then only want to be coached by someone who is also challenger and who can do all those things, which is, I think, not the case. How does that dynamic work as a coach?
So it's very challenging. I think the biggest difference with esports and traditional sports is that the game changes constantly and you need to stay sharp. I notice when I slow down for 1 week how much behind I can fall if I don't stay on edge. I try to play as much solo queue as possible. I play the 1v1s against the players. I think my biggest strength in terms of what I can provide in game is my idea of history. I have a very clear idea of what happened in the past, and this is something that you can add always. Some matchups, what people played, what, for example, like if we're facing Fnatic, I know so much about Reckless. I played with him in a team back in season 2. I've been on the sidelines somehow of his career, his entire kind of trajectory. And that goes the same for a lot of players. And I think that kind of value adds a lot as well. When it comes to in-game specifics, I see the players as the ones that will get me the information I need. For example, if there's a matchup that I don't know about, I can use, for example, Jizuke. He plays it out at the highest level possible, and then I have that information. It's all about making sure you get the information that you need from the players and then using it and putting it together into a beautiful mix.
So you mean that you don't necessarily need to know everything to a T, but you do have the knowledge as to how to work with that information and how to take it and make it into a plan that these guys can work with and get the victories.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess it's similar to like being a caster. It's not like you guys are all challengers,
Yeah, I mean, definitely not. Definitely not. I think there's definitely similarities in that color casters and analysts play the game to a very high level, but in a way, they are also not pro players. For me as a host, I am nowhere near being challenger, and there has been long periods of time where I didn't even play the game. There's also the famous examples of, I believe, Monty, who was famous for not playing that much necessarily. It's where your strengths lie, and it's where, what you're good at, and that might not necessarily be that you need to know every rune and every percentage AD or whatever in the game, right? It's where everything lies. I think it's very interesting because there is that issue as credibility as well, for us definitely, but for you as a coach, being so young and then no offense, you've had a wonderful league career, but it's not like you won anything huge as a player necessarily, right? So do you ever feel like you're lacking credibility, or does anyone ever call you out on that?
It has never happened. I think respect functions in a very delicate way. I think I've kind of the teams I've had the most success with are, for example, Splice, 5 rookies that at the time they were excited to work with me, a name that they recognized. Similar with the Vitality story, and I think definitely that has helped me to mold the relationship much easier.
Yeah.
Because I think if there's no luggage there or no ideas of history, you can kind of start on a fresh page. Mm-hmm. But it's never been an issue, like, oh, you didn't win shit, don't talk to me.
Is it good for a coach to be unproblematic? You say there's no luggage, there's no baggage bringing into one, because as we know in the league scene, there are a lot of people that talk a lot of shit, you know, on Twitter, and we know some examples like Gilius and whatnot, and maybe also to the players or in Skype groups, or I don't know, right? Do you think as a coach it's important to be kind of exempt from that? You're unproblematic because anyone you may ever have to work with, it's got to be right, you know? If you have to work with someone who you've had problems with in the past, how do you deal with that, with those interpersonal relationships?
Like, it happens. Like, people definitely talk, like, way too much. And I try to stay out of that as much as possible. You know, in the past, it was interesting because you could always get information that you weren't supposed to have on those bar conversations and such. But I try to stay out of it as much as possible. My idea of it is if you do a good job, then it will spread automatically, because that is the good side of people talking. Yeah. I think when it comes to the relationship you have with players, it just it puts you in a position where you have to be even more careful about what you do. Mistakes, if you make mistakes as a coach, they kind of hurt the relationship in a way where sometimes it's beyond repair. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what happened with Splice. I saw that the leadership arc kind of ended in a way. I couldn't have the effect on them that I wanted.
Do you blame yourself for it?
Of course, yeah. I think everyone needed a dynamic change. I knew for a fact that those 5 players, individually, they were all great. So it didn't feel right to swap out the player. I look at their careers now. I see Wonder doing amazing, Trash Over, and OG had a fantastic year with Unicorns of Love and so forth. Kobe with Splice, Mickey with G2 as well. I knew individually they were great, so it didn't feel right to swap someone out. Yeah. And I just looked at what I did wrong, and I felt like the leadership arc kind of ended there.
If you don't mind me prying, is there one particular thing that you took away and that you learned and that you took with you to the new coaching jobs you had as a lesson?
I think the biggest thing was the emphasis on being a role model. I think there were times where I did things I asked the players not to do. Mm-hmm. And when they see that, for example, I didn't want them to drink soda, then they see like a bag with a Lipton, half a liter, iced tea, then, this is things that stay with you. That's always in your mind. And when something goes wrong, you're there with all those negative thoughts.
How do you transform that? Because I can imagine, it's hard because you want to tell your players to not do certain things and to live by a certain regimen. We, of course, remember a Daylor back in Fnatic who had the very tight leash on the team and whatnot. But in a way, you should be allowed to do some of those things, right? Do you think that there should be another entity, like someone next to you, a manager or something, who should then take on that role because it's just too much for a coach?
I think at this point, I don't know if it's sustainable, but for now, what I'm doing is if I expect the players to play 6 solo queue games a day, then I do the same. Uh-huh. If I expect them not to drink soda, then I do the same. Anything that I ask from the players, I do exactly the same. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest roadblock for me was that if you are always on guard, if you live in the gaming house as a staff member, then you never really get a chance to relax because no one can really see you at your worst. And I view the players daily and I see them at their worst and at their best. Mm-hmm. Just for my own understanding. I know when they are in their best mind and when they're in their worst mind. And your coach, as you said, has to be the rock. You need to always be constant. And I think staying out of the gaming house, living in your own apartment is the way to go. Because they need to see you in a light where you're working constantly. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that works for a lot of real life situations. I actually think sometimes it's completely absurd that these players live together in a gaming house. And I do understand that it is maybe in a way necessary because they're young and they need guidance and they just need people to kind of teach them the things that they can't do for themselves yet. But if you think like now you live in your apartment by yourself, to imagine that you have to work in a company situation with people for a whole day and then you go home and you don't even have to go home. You are home. So everything that you've dealt with, that you've argued about or that you've been happy about, I don't want to make it too negative. It's still there. Yeah. That is incredible to me. What is kind of your view on that? Are we moving in a different direction or?
So it's, there's pros and cons. Like, for example, this year in review was the owners of Vitality wanted the players to step away from the gaming house model. It was like, it's all bad. We need to move in the direction of having apartments because that is more professional. Mm-hmm. But then I view some of my guys and I know if they lived in their own apartment, it would be chaos because they call, for example, Jizuki likes to say this thing, I'm not a real lifer. I'm a gamer. Yeah. I don't know. So it's like whenever there's anything else in the mix that distracts him from the game, it hurts his performance, for example. And I think it varies. It varies. Some people need that space. Some people need to have everything taken care of. And I think it comes with time. I think whenever you have players that have played for a longer time, they know how to be good. They know how to reach that level. Yeah. Then I think it becomes easier to focus on the personal life because usually with rookies, they don't know what kind of breaks they need to take. They don't know how long they need to play. They don't really know how to obtain that level that makes them good. Yeah. And then you have, for example, a Reckless or a Perks. They know, or a Cabo Shot. They know exactly how much they need to play. They can take breaks. They know exactly how much time they need to put into the game to reach the level that they want to be at.
And beyond that, as you say, like with Jizuki, he says, I'm not a real lifer, but, things that... and I don't want to laugh at people for it because it's just not that easy. If you've lived at home and you've never had to do laundry, how are you going to know when you live in the gaming house? Like someone has to show you. Do you think there should be more emphasis going forward on looking at these players and say, okay, these are the players that can't just do it yet, so we'll help them in the gaming house. And then at some point, if they want to fly the nest, then that's okay. Because it could also be a risk, of course.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. I want to give my players as much freedom as possible. But like if someone came to me, I need to have my own apartment, there's no way in hell I'm going to stop that from happening. I'll give them my recommendation and I would never force someone to be in the gaming house. But I think you have to find what fits for every player. I don't think there's one kind of one sock fits all kind of deal. Or is it glove? I don't know what the saying is.
No. It's definitely true. When we talk about, coaching these guys and living in gaming houses for a lot of them and how young they are, the pressure really is immense. And I think we're moving much more toward a world in which teams employ people that can help with the mental state of mind, sports psychologists, people that can help with the surroundings around it, motivators, whatnot. I'd love to hear from you what your opinion is on all of it and also what Vitality specifically uses.
I think it's a must. You can't leave the mental state of the team up to random because some players have a very easy time just playing on stage and having no issue with it, and some players have a harder time transferring the skills onto stage where that pressure happens. So on my end, I haven't found the right person to take over the subject. I'm very picky. I have a hard time giving away responsibilities. On my end, I try to work on it as much as possible. I try to be inside of the world of sports psychology. I try to read on the subject as much as possible and learn myself. Because I think when it comes from the position of the head coach, it has a greater effect because that trust and that kind of bond is already there. So this is something I put a lot of focus on because I think if your mind is not in the right state of mind, it doesn't matter how good you are. No. So I think this is something that other people put too little emphasis on, and me maybe too much, but I think you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah. Do you think, because before you said that you try and be emotionally kind of unavailable, but when you take on some roles in which you help them with their mental state of mind and then how they're feeling, that does go into that. Is that why you're saying we should have someone actually, but it also needs to be the perfect fit for the team?
Yeah. Like the dynamic of a team is very delicate, right? And I think usually what it is to find out what the problem is with the mental state is usually the exploration of emotions. Why do you feel like this? What is it? What that triggers it? Do you understand that it's a negative thing? When it happens, can you recognize yourself there? And I think meditation ties into it very, very well. Meditation is all about recognizing your state of mind and realizing these emotions coming to you.
Yeah.
And then do you act on them or do you not? And I think that is always the first step. And as I said earlier, we're all human. Emotions are going to be a part of it no matter what, from me too. And it's all about just exploring them. What do they actually mean? Because it is our mind trying to convey a message to us.
Yeah, that's true. But it's, as you say, it is human and it is normal, but that wasn't always regarded as such, right? Yeah. I think definitely in the last couple of years, the topic of mental health awareness is something that luckily has become much, much more important. And I think just is especially for players in a high pressure situation like that. I think for everyone an extension in their lives, there's no shame in that whatsoever. But especially if you're a young kid coming into this situation, there is so much to deal with. I mean, they need a hand.
Yeah. I think it's very real. I think it applies to almost anyone. I know I've been backstage over some analyst desks and such, and I know what kind of immense pressure that comes with it. For me, I'm on the sideline. If I screw up, it's fine because I'm not supposed to be
on
there.
On the desk, yeah.
I know how it is for you guys. I can imagine. Yeah. It must be rough.
Yeah, it's definitely rough. I mean, you've been in the situations. It's insanity behind the scenes. And just to be in a job where then for you're responsible for all these guys and it's all about their well-being and winning. On our situation on the broadcast side, it has to be perfect all the time because the tiniest detail that goes wrong, people will talk about it forever and you can't switch it off. You know, it's on your phone, it's on your computer, it's what you talk about with people. It is constant and there is a lot of pressure. I definitely feel it as well. I have gone to therapy for it because at one point you can't deal with it anymore from the inside and you need someone to help out. So, I definitely respect the fact that you recognize that as well in being with those players. Talk to me also about meditation specifically. This is your thing, you know, this is something you do. Was there ever a moment in your life, something that happened and that you overcame it by meditation or why did it become so important in your life?
I think, my mentality has always been in line with meditation, but meditation was my way of conveying it to others. It was, sometimes you have something, a part of yourself, you don't really know what it is. And then you try to push that onto others and it's kind of confusing. Like, just try to win, It's like, what is he saying? And I think meditation has started with, back in Splice, there was this short time where we worked with Weldon. He was with Splice for some time and then he went over to the Big Fish League with TSM and such, so he left us. But the seed was planted, the meditation idea has stuck with me since that time. And this phrase resonated with me so much that esports is such a mental game. And we are using so little time to practice our minds to deal with all the situations we're in. And meditation is an exercise for the mind, pretty much. You focus on your breathing or whatever way you do it, and whatever distractions that come are okay. You see it as a repetition. You bring back your focus, and it is the same way. Because for me, a lot of the mistakes people do on stage are silly mistakes that make them look, top Reddit, what is this guy doing? EQ assess here, flashing backwards, These are very, very basic mistakes that happen when you lose focus. And then in those moments, you're like, okay, I lost focus and then the game is over. Especially in best of ones, it's crazy. So I think League is a game of concentration in the end. That's why I put a lot of emphasis on it.
On meditation, yeah. I mean, it seems to be working with Vitality for now at least. Also during Worlds, we talk a lot about it. But even though you guys got knocked out in the first round, you it felt like you guys made a change, a ripple effect that lasted throughout all of Worlds. Can you tell me about, just that 2 weeks and probably all the weeks before that you practiced and probably all the weeks after where you thought, where did we drop the ball?
Yeah, it was, there was some bad moments, like the loss against Cloud9. That was one of those classic Vitality losses that I carry very hard on myself, because I think those type of losses shouldn't happen. And if they happen on a constant basis, I think it's a fault of my own preparation. Mm-hmm. Looking back at it, I think we kind of showed this phrase from the Predator movie, if it bleeds, you can kill it. And I think we showed that it's possible to beat the teams that everyone fears. I think that was the main idea. But at the same time, I felt like during Worlds, we were given a bit too much credit for the success of G2 and Fnatic. Because I think what they accomplished came from their own hard work. And I want to also give that credit back to them, because after that speech that I did...
Yes!
After that speech, I'm sure the G2 players and the staff are pissed off about it, because they were like, yeah, you guys got motivated by Yamato's speech. I'm sure that was very bothersome for them.
But how do you look back on it? It's interesting you say that, because I can see how someone's always going to be pissed off, right? But the bottom line of that speech was really play your freaking heart out and do it your way. Yeah. Don't necessarily follow things that people tell you should do. And there's a line in there that I'll always remember where you talked about, it was the doubt that fuels us. It was people telling us that we couldn't do it. That's the background we come from. That fuels us. That really hit me. That was like, and right? I mean, it was very hard for me to even keep the emotions together. But where does that come from? Is that what you say about, the journey that you've made so far? Is that the guys, some of them don't have the easiest coming up and stuff like that? Is that all of that fueling you to win? For sure.
I remember to this day, before we played RNG and we won, what I told the players was, when we drew the group, it was like, okay, RNG, they're going to win the tournament, we're screwed,
We're done.
It is what it is. And then before the game against RNG, what I told the guys, the chances of us being born was next to non-existent. The chances of us being good enough to play in LCS, close to non-existent. The chances of us going to Worlds, the odds are even more stacked against us. So what does this tell us? Our entire lives are a story of the odds being against us. And we conquer those odds. And then we went into the RNG game and we played our game, and it worked out. Because this idea of, for example, Jizuke, his story about how he reached the point where he is now, like everyone in the world was against him. And he kept fighting hard, and he's being rewarded for it. And same for Attila, same for the other guys. It's a game of odds in the end, and they've beaten them.
That is so inspiring. It is completely true. I never stop and think about that. The chances that you end up in the position that you are in, that you went with League at a time that it exploded the way it did, that you ended up with these guys at Worlds, beating, that's the kind of thing that it's healthy sometimes to think about, but not to think about too much. Or you're going to be, well, it's probably all over now, right? Because we already did all of that. But it's absolutely crazy. Looking forward then, where is this going to take us? Where do you see, this vitality going? And
I think, for me, this is the time for us to win titles. Anything less is going to be disappointing. I think now I've retained the roster, the core part of it coming into this year, and everything is shaken up. We have G2, the new big guys. Fnatic is faltering, and now it's up to grabs for anyone. We have a new system, new LEC. It's time for a new dynasty of some sorts, and I think we have the capability to do it. We want to just win everything, go to Worlds, and make a even bigger splash.
Yeah, to make maybe this is going a bit too far, but I almost feel like what happened, and you named it in your speech as well, you cited Misfits and their run in 2017, the year before, and then Vitality uproar, and maybe even, just the Korean team is not performing at all. It feels like there's a ripple movement that started where a lot of people all of a sudden realized we do not have to accept the order as it is. Yes. We can change it. And I feel like that's still going. And that's also the wave that Vitality is riding. It is our time. Things don't have, Fnatic or G2 don't have to win.
Yes.
You know? Is that how it is?
I'm going to quote you on that.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, I'm very much looking forward at, what we're going to see from Vitality. Maybe finally you say it's all about titles. What if Vitality wins those titles? They win LEC twice this year and they win Worlds. What then for you?
What then? I'll celebrate for one day and then is the next thing.
Yeah. On to the next challenge.
I don't know. That's a great question. I'll become a caster. No, I don't know.
Well, gladly have you.
No clue.
We'll see. So basically, I'll ask you after you win your World Championship. Sure. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, thank you very much for talking to me. This was very insightful, and then the best of luck.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Well done, everyone. That was my 1v1 talk with YamatoCannon. I enjoyed talking to him very much about the history, the future of League, and everything in between. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well at home, and we'll see you next time.